We are going cover to cover from the beginning to the end of the Bible. Today we are starting in Genesis 1:1. That is the first verse in the Bible, and we will end in about 6.5 months. We will end at Revelation 22:21, which is the final verse in the Bible, cover to cover, the whole Bible. And we're calling it the story because the Bible is a collection of a ton of little stories that tell a bigger story. Kind of the best way that I've seen to describe that bigger story is that it has 4 chapters: creation, fall, redemption, glory. Creation, everything begins. Yay! Fall, there's a problem. Uh-oh. Redemption, God comes to fix it. Glory, God fixes it, and we get to be with God forever. That's kind of like the grand narrative. Sometimes theologians call it that. The grand narrative, the big story that is in and through the little stories. But if I was going to even summarize that into like a one sentence, what I would say is that the Bible is a collection of stories. It's a story about a high and holy and beautiful God pursuing broken and messed up people. It's about God pursuing you. That's what the story of Scripture is all about. And so that's what we hope you kind of get out of these next 6 months. And you're like, oh my gosh, every week we're going to hear about how God pursues us. Yeah, because you're going to walk out of here and forget it. I forget it the second I walk off stage. We're going to be reminding each other every week that God is in pursuit of you, that he's a good and loving God. Okay, so a little bit about this one, about this today. I have an inner nerd. Does anybody have an inner nerd that you hide because it's been shamed your whole life? Ew, you're a nerd. Anyway, so I only let him out about 10% most of the time. Like on any given day, he gets out about 10%. He's operating at 10% capacity. There have been messages here in which I've dialed him up. I allowed him, a little bit more leash, I guess, 25%. Today we're going 50, so start getting excited. So here's what we're going to do. I sat down and I looked at these first few chapters that we're going to look at, and I counted 12 beautiful, life-giving doctrines that you need to know in order to have your soul just bathed in the goodness of God. I counted 12 of them that I wanted to go through today. So good news, we're not going to do all 12 because we'd be here for like 4 more hours. Okay, I've picked 4, and we got to move quick, so we're just jumping right into it. So this is the first verse in the entire Bible, and it's one of the most important verses. This is how it goes. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Here's where we're starting. We're starting with creation, and it says this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Don't forget those words. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. By far, the most important words in that sentence are God created. God created, and here's why that's important. We didn't come from nothing. We are here for a reason. We're not an accident of atoms somehow finding each other and building life. No, we are designed by a loving creator. This is why the doctrine of creation is such an important doctrine. And I have to say this as a caveat. Maybe you've heard the sort of tension between creationism and atheism. And kind of in that argument, creationism has gotten this reputation for hating. If you're a creationist, that means you hate science. It means you hate atheists. It means you're a mean and stuck-up person. But here's the real thing. We got to get back to this, because what creationism says is that you were made on purpose. What it says is that there is a rhyme and a reason to the way things are. What it says is that living life on this earth is about significance, purpose, and meaning. And without a God who creates, you don't get that. I want to show you a philosopher from the 1800s. His name's Friedrich Nietzsche. First of all, look at that mustache. Holy, that is so good. I wonder how he eats ice cream. That's just a thought. Anyway, so here's the thing. This is Friedrich Nietzsche. He's one of the most famous philosophers ever, because a lot of how our culture sees the world today is based on his way of thinking, his thoughts. If I could summarize sort of his philosophy, here's what I'd say. Friedrich Nietzsche said that we come from nothing and we go to nothing, so everything in the middle is nothing. His system of thought is called nihilism. That's German, nihil, for zero, nothing. It means nothing. And so here's the thing. I'm just going to ask you a simple question, okay? Which of these two scenarios is hopeful and life-giving? From nothing to nothing, nothing in the middle, or from God to God, a whole bunch of God in the middle? What's better? Okay, that's obvious, right? Here's the thing. This is the tension that we have in our culture right now. What we want to do is make ourselves our sort of our own gods, and what nihilism allows you to do. There's nothing, right? It's about nothing. So you get to do whatever it is that you want to do. You get to be whoever you want to be, and you get to do whatever you want to do, because there's no meaning. You have to make it. But I don't know if you've lived a little. Life is hard. And if it's up to you to make your own significance, you're not going to do it. It is impossible. Because what you'll end up doing is you'll find significance sometimes in what you do, right? In your job or your career or your purpose. But have you ever had a bad boss? Or have you ever had like a project that just did not go well and it was your fault? Have you ever had that happen to you? All of a sudden, what is sustaining you and giving you life in this world crashes and burns, and your self-worth is just... it's gone. Or maybe you'll begin to find meaning in like your relationships. Maybe you're a more relational person, and so you'll fall in love with somebody, and they'll complete you, and you complete them. And I'm a hopeless romantic, so I can't believe I'm making fun of this, but I am. And it's so beautiful and lovely, but have you ever been in a relationship with somebody who made a mistake, who was a human, who said the wrong thing to you, or who maybe you made the mistake and the relationship went south and sour because of what you have done, and all of a sudden, the thing that you're finding meaning and significance in this life is gone. And you're just let down. This world is too hard to believe that we came from nothing and we're going to nothing, and everything in the middle is nothing. What creationism says is that in the beginning, God created. And that is where we get our significance. And this is a beautiful kind of the narrative arc of Scripture, is that God creates everything ex nihilo, is the Latin phrase. It also means nothing. It means out of nothing. He creates it out of nothing so that we come from something. We come from Him. And at the end of all things, there is a banquet. This is in Zechariah. There's a huge banquet where there's this huge party where God basically sings over everybody because He's so excited and so happy that all of His children are in one place. We go from God to God, and in the middle, this life is all about Him. That's what creationism is all about. We are made by a beautiful designer who is in pursuit of our souls. That's creation ex nihilo. I want to show you the days of creation because I have to. You can't not preach Genesis 1 and not talk about this. What I love about this is that you might see a pattern here. In the first 3 days, God is building the structure, and then in the last 3 days, He's filling that structure. He creates light and dark, sky and sea and land, and on day 3, He starts filling it. He fills the land with plants. He fills on day 4 the sky with the sun, moon, and stars. On day 5, He fills the land again with animals, and the seas with animals, and the sky with animals, and then He creates His pinnacle of creation, humanity. Humanity is the best thing that He created. He finished with it because that was His crowning achievement. And the 7th day He rested. And I wish I could talk about rest. It's one of the 12 things I wish I could talk about, but ain't got no time for that. When you try to be culturally relevant, it doesn't work. You mess it up. Anybody love Sweet Brown? Anyway. Okay, here's the thing. Here's what I want you to get out of creation. It's a sense of purpose. This is why this is important for us to believe. We are here for a reason. We're here because God loves us and wants to pursue us. One of the interesting things about creation, I'm an inquisitive person, and so I grew up with this idea, God created, right? And I was always like, why? Do you know the rest of the story, God? Did you know what was going to happen? Because it doesn't work out well. Why would you create? Why? There's no verse in the Bible that says God created because blank. Right? I wish there was, but there isn't. We get little hints of it. In one of the prophets, God says that I created humanity or my people for my glory. They glorify Him, right? And then there's also in the Psalms, David says that the heavens and the earth, they reveal your glory. So part of why God created was for His glory. And I think that that's one thing that we have to say because it's true and it's beautiful. But it's not the whole truth. It's like saying that the sky is blue, right? That's true, but there's times when it's not. It's pink and rosy and orange, and you want to take a selfie, #sunset with it. It's just like it's beautiful. The sky is blue, but it's not always blue. God created for his glory, but that's not the full story. And when we make that the full story, what we kind of do is we portray this God who somehow is missing something. Like he needs more glory because he doesn't have any, right? Like he's somehow got a daddy wound and he just needs people to compliment him the whole time, right? Like he's like, give me more glory because I need it. And we often, in Christianity, can get like this. We can preach this sort of narcissistic God in the sky who doesn't really care about you, but he just wants your glory. He wants you to glorify him, and that's what he's all about. But I wanted to show you that that's like half the truth. Because part of what we believe in Christianity is that God is independent. He's independent. And what that means is he doesn't need us for anything. He doesn't need anything for anything. He has everything he needs in himself. So if he doesn't need us, why did he create? I want to illustrate this, and for that I need 3 volunteers. Who's excited? 3 volunteers. Anybody? And you have to be able to sort of catch and throw a little bit. I knew it. Come on, Ethan. Yep. Come on, Tim. Yep. And one more. Yes, you, sir. Come on up. What I want you to do, you guys come right here. You're welcome. Come right here, and I want you to stand kind of in a triangle, okay? Okay, so as they come up, one of the things that we believe about the Trinity is that God has an infinite amount of joy within himself. I'm going to give you this, and he's constantly passing it around. So what I want you guys to do is to kind of stand in a triangle and start passing them. Is that counterclockwise? Yeah, counterclockwise. Counterclockwise, yeah. So just start passing around. What we believe about the Trinity is that constantly, and we see this in Scripture, the Father is glorifying the Son, who is glorifying the Spirit, who is glorifying the Father, who is loving the Son, who is loving the Spirit, who is loving the Father, who is delighting in the Son, who is delighting in the Spirit, who is delighting in the Father. And there's sort of this interplay in the Trinity that there's a constant give and take. They're constantly receiving. Okay, now here's the thing. What you see right here, I would call this contentment. It's manageable, You feel nice because there's some love being passed around, but it's manageable. Okay, happiness is a bit less manageable. You wear it on your face, right? You got a little bounce in your step. Okay, you, and you. Good luck. Figure it out. Right? So this is kind of happiness. Oh, and you dropped a happy bubble. Okay. Oh, he said. Here's the thing. This is happiness. You're walking down the street and it's obvious. It's a little hard to contain yourself because it's like, yay, this is so great. That's happiness. But I don't think God does anything halfway, right? Like when God does something, it's not like, oh, I'm happy. It's always like, yes, this is amazing. And so I think to be more accurate, okay, ready? Okay, go. Okay. Thanks, guys. You can have a seat. Can we give a hand for these guys? At the end there, they had too many balls to manage, right? Have you ever been so happy that it just sprang up inside of you? Have you ever just been like so full of joy? The biblical word is rejoicing, that it comes right out. And all of a sudden, look, there's football fans in here, like you love sport ball. And so there's going to be a time when somebody's going to throw a pig thing, and they're going to catch it like a baby, and then they're going to run. I'm a football fan. I'm just making fun of it. Anyway, and then they're going to get into the end zone. And what are you going to do? Yes! You're going to shout. Because here's the thing, this is what we do when we're happy and it's bubbling up. We shout it out. What if there was so much love and joy and light in the Trinity in the beginning that as it was being passed around, it just bubbled up in God, and what came out of his mouth was, let there be light. And the whole of creation sprang into existence. God doesn't need us to glorify him, but what if he wanted us? I don't mean to imply that God can't contain himself. He's God, right? He does whatever he wants. What if he chose to let it bubble out? And I don't mean to imply that God just all of a sudden one day was like, I'm so happy, I think I'll create. That's not. He definitely had an intentional and beautiful plan for how the creation is so complex. It's so well thought out. So I don't mean to imply that it was just some random boop and we were created. But what if God allowed himself to be so joyful that he wanted to share it with somebody else? I think that this answers the question, why would he create if he doesn't need creation? He overflowed with love. Has anybody in here ever been in love? Raise your hand if you've ever been in love. And I'm not going to make you volunteer for anything. Good job, married people. When you're in love, part of being in love is this, it's a desire. It's a desire to share yourself with someone else. What if God was a spouse, a husband, and he wanted a bride? What if God created out of love? Here's what I believe. God's not some crazy narcissist in the sky who's got some hole that he needs you to fill with glory. God has enough glory in himself. But I don't know a better way for God for my soul, for glory to spring out of my soul and glorify and praise his name than for a high and holy God to create out of an overflow of love. That makes my soul want to praise him. And this is what I believe. And this is pure speculation. This isn't in the Bible. But I believe that he doesn't need us. And so part of how he created was he had to want to. And he's constantly refers to himself as a spouse, as a husband, as a lover. And I got to believe he just wanted to share himself with us. That is the beauty of creation. It reveals a God who is worthy of praise. That's why we need to believe in creation. That's creation. Creation ex nihilo is kind of the Latin phrase that goes with that. I want to move on and show you this next one because it's powerful. I want to show you just how good it was before the fall. Can we move on to humanity? And this is the doctrine associated with the humanity is the imago Dei. It means the image of God. Let's go to verse 26. It says this, Then God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. God goes on to talk about the rules of the garden. We'll cover that in a second. Excuse me, but I just want to show you this, that we're made in the image of God. What this means is that you look like God on some level. And it's not to say that God has like hands and feet. It's definitely in the Bible says that he is, like God uses his hands, and God has seems like God has a mouth. Out of his mouth come words of life. But it's not necessarily that. It's not necessarily what it means to be made in the image of God. There's this huge question out there, like what does this mean? And if you go to like different churches or you study different theological traditions, you'll get a different answer. And all of them are pretty legitimate, I think. I want to show you, this is a summary. It was one of my favorite theologians, summarized the three major views that we've had on this across history. All of these are legitimate. Can we throw that graphic up there? What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Here's the first one. This was popularized by Martin Luther. It's the substance theory, that something of our substance is like God. It's not necessarily hands and feet, like I said. It's more about your heart, your mind, and your will. If you look at the scriptures, what you'll see is that God has emotions. God is angry in the scriptures, and there's a psalm that says he feels anger every day. God shows delight in his people and in his son. God has joy. God has love. He has emotions. He has grief. He has emotions. And we see that God has this crazy, beautiful, complex plan for the way that creation would be made and his plan for it to progress through time. So we know God has a mind. He's thoughtful. He has thoughts. And he also has a will. He desires things and he goes after them. That's kind of your will, your willpower. People who are very strong-willed, they do whatever they want, right? Your will is your ability to make a choice to do what you want to do. And so we see God making choices and creating and stepping in and saving, and we see God have a will. And so what the early reformers said is that the imago Dei means that we're like God in substance. That's beautiful, right? Because if you've ever had emotions and you were called crazy, guess who also has emotions and people don't like them sometimes? God. If you're a thinker, if you are a learner, and you love to see the process of things, guess who also loves that? It's God. If you're a person who is like, we got to get this done, guess who else is like that? Your heavenly Father. It means that being part of being made in the image of God means that you are like him in some way. That's the substance theory. It's a great theory. Here's a second one, is the relationship idea, or the relationship theory. What this means, this comes actually directly out of the scriptures. Can we throw verse 26 up or 27 up there? It says this. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. This was popularized by a theologian named Karl Barth at the turn of the century, 19th century. And basically what he says is, what that verse is saying is that somehow in the image of God, God creates man, male and female. And part of what God is saying is that he's created this relationship, two different people that have to have a relationship together. Part of what it means to be made in the image of God is that we fall in love, is that we love our children, is that we have friends, it's that we treat people who maybe don't treat us so well, we treat them with love and sacrifice. That is God-like, right? Like that's what it's like to be made in the image of God, is to love other people well. That's kind of the relationship theory. I love that theory because if you've ever been in love, you know that somebody else knows what that feels like, is God. If you've ever had a friend and you've loved that relationship, guess who else loves friendship? The God of the universe. If you've ever had a roommate that you really loved, guess who's preparing rooms for you in heaven? God. God, part of being made in his image is that we are relational beings. That's the second one. Here's the third one. This is probably what I would call this the most biblical one, the straight from the Bible. And I want to show you, it's the authority theory. Let's go to verse 25, or 26, God says this. Then God said, let us make man in our own image and after our own likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the things. Go down to verse 28. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over it. Part of what it means to be made in the image of God is to be a representative of his authority to the creation. This is a little confusing, so follow me here. I want to show you this. By far, the two biggest words that are used to describe what God is doing here is the words image and likeness. Image and likeness. I think it was either the 50s or the 60s that there was this archaeological dig, and they discovered these ancient texts from Persia, our modern-day Iran, Iraq area, that these texts describe something else that they had seen a lot in the archaeological record. What they had seen was that it seems like a common practice for kings in this like early time of like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, up to Moses. What kind of the practice of kings was to set up statues that looked like them all over their territory. And these statues were kind of a reminder of like who's in charge. It's the king, right? That guy, I can see his face right there. It's a symbol of his authority. What these texts described those statues as is the image and likeness of the king. Over and over. Those images and those statues, the image and likeness of the king, that those two words are used over and over and over to describe those statues. So here's what theologians then they saw that and they're like, there's this ancient practice that we've lost touch with over the centuries, but when we understand this, we see what God is doing here. God is using us in his image and likeness to be a symbol of his dynamic and beautiful rule and reign here on earth. What that means is that we work righteousness and justice in our relationships. We right wrongs when we see them. We try and take care and steward the things that we have in our possession, our houses, our lawns, our children, the relationships that we have. We try to represent God well in those relationships. Part of what it means for Jesus to bring the kingdom is that we get to participate in this dynamic rule and reign of the God of the universe. Part of what it means to be made in the image of God is that we rule with him over creation. What it means is that we have a responsibility to love it and steward it well. So if you're, I had a neighbor once who, he was retired, so his lawn was perfect. And I was young and worked full-time and did ministry and had a baby, so my lawn was not. And we used to have that. I used to think he was so annoying. So this is my confession of that. He's a great person. But his life was about making his sphere of influence as beautiful as it could be. That was what he got a sense of purpose out of. And I used to think that's so silly, right? Like, isn't there more than your yard? And there is, but I'm not implying that. But what he did was he took every minute of every day to take care of everything that was under his possession. That's part of what it means to be made in the image of God. If you have this desire to right the wrongs in the world, to make everything that your job requires of you, to make everything that your relationships require of you, to make those things beautiful, that's part of what it means to be made in the image of God. If you have that desire, guess who else does? The God of the universe. This is a beautiful thing. And here's a part of the history of this doctrine. In the early 200s, 300s AD, Rome sends missionaries into the Celtic lands. This is France and Britain. And so they're sending missionaries up there, and they're having trouble. A lot of them are getting murdered, which happens when you're a missionary. So there's that. But so what they do is they kind of have this little conference, and they're like, how do we present the gospel to the heathens? That's just the word that they used back then. So how do we do this? And what they started to see is that some missionaries were having success in this mission. And one of the reasons that they were having success is because they were pointing to this idea that humans are made in the image of God. See, the Celts had kind of a caste system. There's people on the bottom, those are the poor people, and on the top you have the rich people and the people who are like the priests and have like the leaders, and there's kind of a very slim sort of middle class. Does it sound like anything? Anyway, so here's the thing. Part of what they were preaching, and part of the reason why the gospel was attractive and went forth in the Celtic mission was because the missionaries came and told the poor and the middle class that they are equally made in the image of God, and that gave them something they wanted more. Tell me more about this God who made me in his image. This is so different than anything they've ever experienced. People who love the Imago Dei, being made in the image of God, are people who have spent time on the bottom, people who have suffered, people who have been called fat or ugly, people who have been put down because of their gender, people who have been put down because of their social status, have been put down because of their race, have been put down because of whatever. People who love the Imago Dei are people who have suffered at the hands of humans. And part of what the Imago Dei means is that when you disagree with somebody, you can't dehumanize them. Part of what this means is it's not our job to demolish people in an argument. Do you see what you're saying there? I'm going to demolish you in this argument. I'm going to make you feel less than. Part of what the Imago Dei means is that the people you disagree with are equally made, regardless of sin, even if they're wrong, they're made in the image of God and need to be treated with dignity and respect. That's what the Imago Dei means. Necessary? Yeah, it's good. Okay, let's continue. So we covered creation. We covered the image of God. I want to show you the fall. Okay, I'm making a decision on the fly here. The last service, I went through the process of sin, the cycle of sin. I wish I had time to go through that again. I don't. I'm cutting it. So if you missed it, we'll post the first and second service online. Did you hear that, guys? Make sure we get them both. Yeah. He is, can we throw that picture up there? What James is talking about is kind of a cycle of how sin works in our lives. First, you are lured. It's a fishing term. It literally is a fishing term. It's kind of like this, ooh, that looks nice, right? And then you're enticed. And enticed is a stronger lure. It's like, ooh. Have you ever seen it's like teens in a smartphone, right? You're like, oh, come on. You can Pied Piper them anywhere, and so that's enticed. And then the language switches, and it's amazing might not be the right word, but it gets violent. It says it conceives sin. It gives birth to sin. Then sin grows, and sin brings death. That's the cycle of how sin. Now, I want to start there because we're going to overlap that onto the fall, because you can see this happening in Eve. So let's go to Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Thank you. It says this. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord had made. And he said to the woman, did God actually say you shall not eat of the tree in the garden? I want you to see this. Here's the lure. Did God actually say? Part of the lure in how sin works in our lives is that it gets us to question God's words. That's the lure. Hey, I know you're not supposed to do this, but is that real? Are you really not supposed to do that? Are you really not supposed to look at porn? Are you really not supposed to just let your emotions fly at people? Are you really not supposed to just, spend your money that way? It gets you to question God's words. Then she's enticed. I want you to see this. He said to the woman, did God actually say that you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the tree of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. But the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Throw that next one up there. This is part of being enticed. He says, God, I'm going to paraphrase the serpent's words. He says, God's holding you back. He knows he's got something good, and he doesn't want you to have it. And basically what he's doing is he's getting her to question God's character. Is God good? Does God really want good things for you? That's the enticing. I want you to see how strong that argument is, right? God's got something good that he doesn't want for you. God is just like your dad or your mom. God is just like that leader that you saw. He's got good stuff, but he wants to hold it back from you. And it makes so much sense with our human relationships. That's kind of how it works for us today. Obviously, there's only one other human at this point. So let's do this. Then it conceives sin. I want you to see this. This is verse 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, this is kind of amazing, because you can see what's kind of being birthed in her is this idea that she looks at the sin, she looks at the fruit, the metaphorical sin in this case, and she sees that it's good for food, delight to the eyes, and desirable for wisdom or practical. Look at that argument for a second. Sometimes when we are tempted, this is a very powerful argument. It's good, it's delightful, and it's practical, right? I can get what I want if I just steamroll everybody, and that's good because I want to get what I want. It's delightful. It's always a delight to get what I want, and it's practical. Then I get what I want, right? It is good, delightful, and practical to view pornography. It gets me what I want. It is good, delightful, and practical to completely blow my money this way. I want you to see this, that part of how sin and part of how our flesh responds to sin is it makes this argument. It's good, it's delightful, and it's practical. It conceives sin. It's being born right there. And then it gives birth to sin. This is where it transitions into action. All of this happened in her mind, in her soul. Now it transitions into actions. It says she took of its fruit and ate. Now she's actually done something. Then I want you to see how it grows. This is took of its fruit and ate, verse 6. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Not just her sin, now sin is growing. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. It produced death. And what's kind of interesting about this first, like the very first thing to die is leaves on a tree. I think it was really interesting. Because sometimes the way that sin works is little things begin to die, little things that seem insignificant. That sort of joy that was in your relationship, now it's just kind of a normal relationship, right? Like that little bit of happiness and the clarity of thinking that you were going through your life with, that just begins to die just a little bit. But you think you can tolerate, that's just a little bit. The sin's not killing everything. I can just keep going in this sin. I think it's really significant that the first death that's produced is like these leaves on a tree. I want you to see, here's my reason for showing you this. Because I want you to know how sin works. Because if Eve could have stopped sin at number 1, she'd have been good. This is how sin and temptation work in our lives. And if you know how it works, you can stop it earlier in the process because each step it gets stronger. It's enticed, it conceives, it gives birth, it grows, it brings death. It gets stronger every step of the way. And if you can learn to recognize when you're being lured or enticed, but preferably lured, just stop it, like right there. This is a very practical and powerful way that you can become more like God in your life. You can become more holy. And so that you can kind of see that little part too. I'm going to cut it because I want to move on. But I do want to show you what happened. This is Genesis 3. This is called the fall. Hamartiology is the sort of the word for the study of sin in Scripture. It is fascinating. By far the best book. Okay, I have to tangent. By far, I just said I'm cutting something. Josh, stop. By far the best book on this is Overcoming Sin and Temptation by John Owen. It's written in 1648. You need to buy a dictionary with it so that you can understand what he's saying. But it is eye-opening for if you struggle, which you do, if you struggle with sin. Here's how sin came into the world. I want to just read this account, and then I'm going to point out a few things really quickly. This is Genesis 3, chapter 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. And he, the serpent, said to the woman, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of the tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.' But the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths." That's the story of the fall. I just want to point out some things really quickly here. I want to point out how tricky and how convincing sin can be. Can we go to verse 6? It says this, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food," look at this threefold argument, "good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desired to make one wise," it's practical. I want you to see the argument that the serpent has made, and now that her own flesh is looking at this sin, or metaphorically in the fruit, what she's seeing is this thing that is good, delightful, and practical. This is the argument that sin so often makes in our lives. Yeah, it's okay to do that. You know why? Because it's good. It's delightful, it's going to be great, and it's practical. It's going to advance your career. It's going to make you better. It's going to help you get what you want. That's part of what sin is. That's part of how tricky it is. It makes a powerful argument. I want to show you one other thing, because the serpent says this. This is verse 1. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say?" Part of how sin starts is it gets you to doubt the word of God. It gets you to start to doubt what God actually said. And then he goes on, makes it even stronger. He says in verse 5, "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good from evil." Another thing, so you doubt God's words. Now what the serpent is doing is he's making Eve doubt God's character. God has something good for you that he's holding back from you, and if you sin, you'll get that good thing. Part of how sin works is it makes us doubt God's word and then his character. And when you see that pattern in your life, when you see yourself beginning to doubt these things, not questioning can be good. It can lead to answers that are powerful, but doubting, when you begin to doubt those things, know that sin is not far behind. That's how it works. I want to show you, here's what I really want to focus on, which is the account in which the curses are. So this is verse 15. I'm sorry, verse 16. Throw that up there, 16. It says to the woman, so they've sinned, and now God is talking about the consequences of that sin. He says, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. What's the consequences of sin is death, right? That's what it says in Scripture. But I want you to see these three deaths. There are three different deaths that happen. Here's the first one. He says, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Lots of theologians point to that and talk about the gender wars. What this means is that sin, where a relationship was equal and beautiful, sin has now made it a competition of power. Who gets to be in charge? Who gets to rule? She desires to her husband, and part of what that means is to be rule over her husband, but he shall rule over you now, because sin has wiggled its way into a beautiful and loving relationship. Now it's a struggle. Now it's hard. There is a death to the peace that was in that relationship. Here's the next one. He says to Adam, and to Adam he said, verse 17, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat of the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you are taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. What God is saying is that there was this relationship in the garden, this beautiful relationship of trees just having fruit, or grain just being ready to be plucked. Part of life now, part of the death that happens because of sin, is that life is hard. You have to work hard for the stuff that you have. That's one of the consequences of sin. Finally, God kind of kicks him out of Eden. This is verse 22. Then the Lord God said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now, lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. There's a death in the relationship with the God of the universe. Sin has come in and wiggled its way into these beautiful unions that are present before the fall, and now all of a sudden these relationships have death in them. They're hard. And if you've ever tried to grow spiritually, you know it's really hard. It's really hard to not sin. It's really hard to spend time with him when there are so many demands on our schedule because life is now harder to work. Growing spiritually has become very difficult because there's a death there. I want to talk a little bit about the wrath of God here, because he's saying this is a consequence of the sin that you have committed. Now here's the consequence. The wrath of God is an incredibly unpopular idea. And I want to just give you a quick little argument for why you want an angry God. I think you want an angry God. We see this in the Psalms. You think you want an angry God because when you are wronged and you have been hurt unfairly and you've suffered injustice, and you take it to God and you say, God, the world is broken. God, things have not worked out the way that they're supposed to. God, this is so painful and hard for me. If your God says, oh, shoot, dang it, not much I want to do about that, that's not the God that you want. You want a God who is going to be offended for you. You want a God who is so radically on your side that he gets angry on your behalf. My favorite psalm is Psalm 18, where David says, the cords of death entangled me. I was in trouble. I was going to go down to the grave. And then it describes in this beautiful and epic poetry the anger and the wrath of God rising up to save his loved one, to save his son, to save his king, to save the one who delighted. What does the Bible say about David? He's the one who was after the heart of God. To save David, God gets angry. Do you have a God who, because he loves you, gets angry when you're hurt? Or do you have a God who you've taken the teeth out of? Part of the wrath of God is this idea that anger is always in the defense of something you love. And if we get rid of God's anger this way, if we just say, I don't like that, then what we get is a God who doesn't have any power to help you, who isn't motivated to save you, who looks at the wrong that you suffer and says, whoops. Part of the anger of God is his showing his love for you. So this is my hope. I want to end with this idea that God, even though there is consequences for sin, he doesn't end, but he inserts hope. into this, and this is from, a lot of theologians call this the Protoevangelium, or the first good news, the first gospel. He's talking to the serpent. He says this: I will put enmity, that's strife, between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. That last two lines, he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel, are called the first good news. What God is saying is that the woman is going to have a son eventually. That son's going to have a son, and that son's going to have a son, but there will be a son who will come and right this wrong. You will bruise his heel, but he will crush your head. There is a son who is coming, who is going to reverse the effects of sin in the world. And here's the thing: if you have an angry God, the way to get rid of his anger isn't to just say he's not angry. The way to get rid of his anger is for him to take it upon himself. This is what Jesus did at the cross. Jesus took the anger of God upon himself so that we wouldn't have to receive it. And now, as Paul says in Romans 8, that there's now nothing that separates you from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. If you believe that Jesus is Lord, sin, the consequences of sin, are being reversed in your life. And it is in the account of sin and how God deals with that sin, that God first inserts the hope of the universe. That God first preaches this gospel, that there is somebody who's going to come back and he's going to right these wrongs. I need you to know this, that if you are entangled in sin, if you like things are going wrong, and maybe you have an addiction, maybe you just have like a problem, like you can't stop this bad habit of maybe just destroying people or being passive in relationships, or however you're experiencing like death in your life. If sin is hurting you, you need to know this: there is hope. There is hope. Today we talked about those first two chapters, creation and fall, but the next two are the best ones, man. The next two are the best ones, because redemption is how Jesus comes back to right these wrongs, to reverse the effects of sin, to take the wrath of God so that it is no longer a thing for those who are his children. And then glory is when there is no longer anything between us anymore. We go from God, we come from God, we come to him in this life, and when we go to him, to his side. There is hope. Christianity is fundamentally a hopeful religion. I'm going to bring the rest of the band up, and as they come up, I want to close with this idea. Christianity has gotten a reputation for being a religion of condemnation, of anger, being a religion in which, if you are a Christian, your job is to basically stab people with your words until they figure out that they've done something wrong, right? Like that's kind of like the reputation that Christianity has. But the Christianity that we see in the Bible is one of hope. It is one that says that, yeah, the present stinks right now, but there is something better coming. It is a forward-looking religion that says Jesus is coming back to right all the wrongs, to correct everything that is broken in this world, to bring healing, to bring a move of God that moves our souls from death to life. Part of this idea of Christianity is that he stood before creation with eternity in his hands and decided to create us, to save us, and to bring us into the deep and beautiful relationship with him. That is the story, and it is a story that is dominated by the word hope.